I never looked down to see how fast I was going, but I was pretty much wide open in fourth gear. Never saw the cop. He was gone. So with all the success of Fantasy Coachworks and the expansion via the franchising, the four-ball rally event, we felt like we were conquering the world at that point, and it was time to get a reward for myself. I felt like I had spent 100 hours a week since 1975 to bring me all the way up to 1985, and sacrificing all my time and weekends, not only working on Fantasy Coachworks, but on rental properties in the evenings. And I was looking at either a Lamborghini Countach, which I loved, or the Porsche 930. And neither one of them were available from local dealers because they were gray market Euro spec cars at that time. So I went down and looked at the Countach and then talked to a couple of mechanics, got some advice to stay with the German engineering, and I did that and brought the car in through the Port of Houston. It was a 1985 model, and this was October of 1984, just a few months after the four-ball rally. And one of the reasons I like the car, aside from the spectacular looks of it, it's a work of art, it's a sculpture. Looks like a beautiful woman from the back. It was the world's fastest production car in 1985 from 0 to 60. So that intrigued me also because I always wanted to have the best or the fastest or what have you. Mike Giaffino, the guy that was with me in the four-ball rally, we both flew down to Houston. We got the car and drove it back to St. Louis. And that was our first experience with a, what I'll call, you'd have to call it an exotic car at that point, a 930 turbo Porsche, not available in the States for those 2 years, 84 and 85. So that car went with me to all the different car shows and some of the expansions. We took it to grand openings of franchises. When we would open up a franchise store, we would take a semi of cars with us and put them on display when we did a grand opening at the store. So that car was with me for 32 years. It only had 25,000 miles on it, but I will tell you that all 25,000 miles were aggressive, enjoyable driving. You spend 1 hour in a car like that, and it equals a lifetime of driving any other type of vehicle. So we were having a Miss Fantasy preliminary contest out at this bar out in the high-end area of St. Louis. I think it's Chesterfield area. And I took the car, to there. And of course, I tried not to. I'm not a big drinker at all. I try not to drink when I'm, involved in anything professionally or working. But you always have a couple little drinks or what have you. And I was Fantasy Jim on stage, introducing the girls and so on. So now it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. I got to get up and go to work the next day. Got to get the car home. I was on the gas pretty good on a pretty big boulevard that led right up to the interstate, and I went flying by a cop that was sitting right there with a radar gun in the gas station, and I immediately seen his lights flip on. Now, I've only done this once in my life, and it was on a motorcycle. But for some ridiculous reason, I decided to run from this cop. When my adrenaline kicked in and I let that car eat on the fast lane of an interstate with, pretty much nothing going on around you, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I never looked down to see how fast I was going, but I was pretty much wide open in fourth gear. Never saw the cop. He was gone. And I tell you what, that was probably one of the most scariest incidents in a car, because we were out in the open road, as we all know, and you had had a couple of drinks, not to the point of you were swerving or anything like that, and you have a cop on your tail, and you decide, well, I'm very well known in this city. You're going to know who it is when you pull it over, and you decide that you're going to run like I did when I was a 16-year-old kid on my motorcycle. So I kept that car for quite some time. It was in the garage. It was all tricked out, had OZ racing wheels on it with color match centers. It had steel box rockers on it, leather red steering wheel. Car was guards red. Leather shift knob. We put a short shift kit in it. Billy Boat stainless steel exhaust, which was basically just straight pipes. You know, there was no smog equipment on this car at all. One day my wife says, why does that car sit in the garage like that all the time? All we do is pay insurance on it. And I started thinking about that, and I thought, you know what? I guess I should sell it. I put it up for sale, and I was immediately contacted by a guy who was a dentist in Mannheim, Germany. And I talked to him. He was very, very broken English, and of course I didn't know any German at all. So I asked him why he didn't buy one of those cars over there in Germany. And he said because he couldn't find one as nice as mine. And I didn't really understand that, figuring that somebody had to have a nice one over there in Germany. But anyway, he liked this car, and he actually flew from Germany to St. Louis, Missouri, drove the car to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, put it in a shipping container with all the stock parts that I still had, and he wanted to take it back to Germany. And his goal was to reverse all the custom parts that I had so painstakingly planned out on this vehicle, and he wanted to put it back to stone cold stock. But at that point, I thought, well, it's going to be his car, and so on. And I will tell you this, I think every car guy will tell you this that had a nice, really specialty vehicle at one time or another, that it was the stupidest mistake that I ever made selling a beautiful 930 turbo with 25,000 miles on it. Because you know what happened 2 years later? Those air-cooled turbos exploded at the height of the market. They were bringing $395,000 for a short term. Now they hover about 200 grand for one in this condition. I sold the car for the same price I paid for it in 1984, which was $50,000. A $50,000 car that I got $50,000 for, people would think that's a win. In reality, I lost $100,000 to $200,000 by deciding that we were paying too much insurance to keep that car locked in the garage. When I bought that car, I was rewarding myself for all the success. You know, remember I started out with $500, one semester of college, and no technical experience or, you know, in running a business or anything like that. Just a snot-nosed kid that was 20 years old. So that car to me was a representation of everything that I had built. And when the company imploded and I was back down to one store and went from the rags to riches back to the rags, so to speak, that car was a representation of what had happened. And from a car standpoint, though, it was the most spectacular vehicle and the most scary vehicle you could ever drive. The quality of the German engineering and the sound it made when you closed the door, which was a thump. There was not a tinny sound anywhere. The quality of the interior, everything about the car was just perfection in my mind. It was, again, a piece of art. And when you drove that car, if you drove it aggressively, it would scare the living hair off of your head because it was insanely fast. It had a little bit of a turbo lag, but when it hit the power, that thing would literally do a wheelie and would cross lanes if you were in a curve. If you were in any kind of a curve. I remember sitting at a stoplight and the road went to the left, and I just let it eat right off the stoplight, and without even thinking, in a split second, that car was in the opposite lane because of the pure force of the back wheels. The two front wheels couldn't steer at all. They were completely over like that. They call that car the Widowmaker because so many guys spin them out. I never spun the car out, luckily, but the experience of driving that car is something that nobody would ever forget. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
When you're buying a pre-owned car, it is critical to get a professional mechanic to inspect it every time. And so the Lemon Squad is the easiest way to do that and the most affordable. Generally within 24 or 48 hours, they can get somebody on site anywhere in the country with their nationwide network of trained professional mechanics that are going to give you a ton of pictures and a full report of exactly what's going on with this car. It's a great way to avoid scams, and it's a great way to get a very clear picture of the car that you're buying, and this ammunition can make you the shrewdest negotiator of all. It also makes the drive home a whole lot easier and keeps a little bit more money in your pocket, and I know that you'll love the results from the Lemon Squad. So check them out now at the link in the description below for a special discount and to make sure that you're buying the car that you think you are.